We are covering the ethics of media in Chapter 14, and this topic is complex and objective. In trying to make sense out of the many decisions and problems that face people who work in media, a range of philosophical principles, values, and moral ideas are used. Principles of ethics are a way to help people decide what action to take when the answer is not obvious or in black and white. So in the beginning of the chapter, there is a story about ethics in media, which talks about the struggle the media faced during 9/11. AP photographer Richard Drew photographed a man falling from the Twin Towers. He had leapt to his death and was somewhat identifiable in the picture. Drew had to decide if the image should run in the newspaper, and he ultimately decided that this falling man image was newsworthy and an accurate depiction of the events that day. Journalists take pictures to document events, to give a visual account of an event, and many times these images are disturbing. So it's important to understand the impact of images on the public, to know that you are publishing them for a purpose and not for profit. And sometimes in this process, people get hurt. This image came to light again when the show Mad Men came on the air, and in the opening credits there was a graphic image similar to the photograph of the falling man, and people have been very divided on this particular photo. So how is it that we decide what is an important account, and how many people are worth hurting, and what should we do as a media practitioner? Richard Drew justified his actions, and it's kind of summed up in the quote that I have here. I photograph what happened, and in turn I record and document history, and this is what happened. This is history. So he said, this is what happened that day, and I took a picture of it, and it explains the event. Morals are a code of behavior based on your own religious and philosophical principles. Morals do not have to be rational. For instance, we cannot defend slavery, but many slave owners did not feel morally wrong, even though it is irrational to enslave another human being. There was a justification based on their philosophy, which they went so far as to defend their position through war. They had an illusion of legitimacy based on their moral beliefs. Another example of this would be being against interracial relationships or interracial socialization. It's not logical, but based on a belief system rather than a truth. Ethics, in turn, are a rational way of deciding what is good for individuals and society. And when you have competing ideas and neither seems to be the clear answer, you can look to ethics to help you wade through issues like that. So we're going to look at some different philosophies put forth on ethics to help us understand this rational decision-making process as it relates to the media and the press. Aristotle was a famous Greek philosopher who studied under Plato, and he was the tutor to Alexander the Great. And he was kicking out the jams with his giant brain around 350 BC. And he wrote about ethics, logic, natural science, psychology, politics, art, you name it. If it was part of the human experience, Aristotle was on it, and he was learning about it and writing about it and talking about it. And what he believed is that the ultimate good was happiness. And he outlined many ideas that are considered relevant in today's world. On the topic of ethics, Aristotle developed what's called the golden mean, which is balance. He believed that his midpoint idealism would help one make ethical decisions, and that extremes were the enemy of ethics. And this is an idea that's really ingrained in American society. So if you can stay in the middle, you'll probably be ethical and morally correct. Immanuel Kant was an 18th century German philosopher, and his ideas are different than Aristotle. Kant called his philosophy on ethics the categorical imperative. His idea was that in order for an act to become moral, it must be universally moral, and that we would accept anyone acting as we are. So, a moral obligation that we should act in a way in which we would be willing to have everyone else act. He thought to use people as a means to reach an end was immoral. And Kant also felt that unethical behavior could not be justified by a desirable outcome. That just because you get what you desire through a decision, it does not make the act you chose to get what you want ethical. So again, in the idea of slavery, the slaves built much of the economic infrastructure of our country, and people benefited from their labor, but that does not make it ethically right on any level. John Stuart Mill proposed the principle of utility. Utilitarianism supposes that ethical behavior arises from actions that provide the greatest good for the greatest number. And Mill's ideas can be seen in the hero mentality, like in a movie where someone sacrifices themselves for the good of many. The book cites Spock in Star Trek, Wrath of Khan, when he exposes himself to a lethal dose of radiation in order to save everyone on the ship. And he dramatically says, "The good of many outweighs the good of one." And so I have a link here on the slide if you want to watch Spock die. And it really exemplifies Mill's ideas. Mill also expressed the idea that an act was moral if the outcome was desirable. So based on this idea that it was desirable to the greatest number, that actions resulting in the happiness of society as a whole were worth the pain it might cause to the few. John Rawls is a contemporary philosopher who took the ideas of Mill's utilitarianism and added it to his principle, which is called the veil of ignorance. So he felt it is just to maximize liberty for all people without thinking of ourselves as the personal beneficiary. So here again we have that idea of selflessness and anonymity of the person making the decision. They are not a factor, but liberty for the greatest number is the right choice. Liberty is defined as freedom from control, interference, obligation, restriction, hampering conditions, power or right doing, thinking, speaking according to choice. So the right outcome does not interfere with the most number of people's right to make choices or have power to do or speak or think. In modern media, there is an idea of ethics based on social responsibility, and this idea came out of the Hutchins Report, which was written by the Hutchins Commission, a committee that was formed in the late 1940s to study the responsibility of the press in the United States. The report had two major conclusions which have influenced the conscience of American media since they were published. The press has a responsibility to give voice to the public and to society. This is the idea that the press function as a truthful and intelligent account of the world and serve as a forum for exchange of comment and criticism, and it should also represent the groups that exist in society. The press should represent the goals and values of the people it serves and give them access to information. The second major conclusion was that the free press has not been living up to its obligation to the public because of its need to serve its commercial entities. So the Hutchins Commission found that part of the press had sold out for profit and that corporations were limiting free speech by their control over media outlets. So it's just that whole idea of being responsible to society through the media. Sissela Bach came up with a 3-step model to help media practitioners wade through the murky waters that are ethics. And this is what she came up with to help us make right decisions, moral decisions. First is consult your conscience. How do you feel about the action or the piece of media that you're putting out or participating in? 2, seek alternatives. Is there another way to achieve your goal that will not raise an ethical issue or someone who can give you advice? And the third thing she came up with was hold an imaginary ethical dialogue with all involved. Ask yourself questions, how this will affect others, and who is involved. And then this will lead to more thoughtful and ethical decisions if you can question what you're doing and question the media and your motivation behind putting it out. Enforcing ethics can be a really difficult task. There's a few solutions to guide media practitioners down an ethical path. One solution is to employ an ombudsman or an advocate for the audience. And an ombudsman takes the media consumer's view, so they are like a mediator. Another is to outline a code of ethics before there are issues, and many media outlets have a code of ethics that they try to adhere to. The Society of Professional Journalists has 3 main principles in their code. They seek truth and report it as fully as possible. They act independently and minimize harm. That is all the information I have for you today on ethics. Thanks for listening.